began with the airlines. No one really thought such a thing was possible, so when it did begin, it was gradual, not something that occurred overnight. Before, when we first heard the news, that was something. I'll never forget that night, as most of us won't. The night that Brian Williams cried harder than anyone on television I've ever seen do before. Well, that sort of thing you don't just forget. We knew it was important when Comedy Central started airing serious news. 5 years. That's what he told us we had left. 5 years. Humanity has faced tragedy on an almost regular basis. But perhaps our species would be best judged on the merit of how we conduct ourselves in the most dire of circumstances. As Mark Twain put it, peace by persuasion has a pleasant sound. But I should not think that we would be able to work it. Because to do that means that we must change the human race, and history seems to show that that cannot be done. 5 years, by George Newman. When Brian announced it, well, I can't really express into words the kind of pain and suffering I saw in his face, so I won't even try. But the redness in his cheeks and the tears streaming down did make us realize that this was no hoax. After a few minutes, he kind of hung his head and he just sobbed a little. And it was silent. I don't mean in the room I was in or on television. I mean everywhere in the world it was silent. It's hard to believe that for at least a moment in time we all just shut the fuck up for a second. We were all in shock. Almost immediately there were mass riots. Atlanta was hit hardest. It almost burned away. In each city, the devastations would make the Rodney King riots look like amateur hour. The hospitals were filled with dead and dying, and soon they were cast into these abandoned warehouses where they would just rot. Morticians were brought up into the emergency rooms because the doctors were leaving in droves. The military started a draft, not for soldiers, but for medical technicians. We all wondered about the destruction of this comet. I mean, we'd seen Armageddon. Couldn't we send Bruce Willis up there to do something about all this? Scientists assured us that this was not possible. The future was bleak. But the most dismal point of humanity is when it all began to change. Now, like I said, it began with the airlines. They had agreed to this industry-wide meeting, and sources later said that it was the CEO of JetBlue who said it first, but the originator is not important. What is important is that they decided to do something which no one else expected. They decided they had a moral obligation to continue getting families together during the final moments of Earth, to continue business, but at no cost. The announcement was shocking. You know, not like finding out you only have 5 years left to live, but uplifting at least. What happened next was even more uplifting. Car companies followed suit. They began manufacturing their top-of-the-line luxury models and just giving them away. There was no lottery, there was just a line. I mean, you'd go down to the dealership, they'd toss you the keys, and you'd be on your way. After that, thousands of other companies followed suit. Books, movies, clothing, electricity, toys, all of it just free to anyone who wanted. The miracle was that so many people kept going to work, even after the companies explained they no longer have money to pay their employees. By our third year into it, money had become this rarity. I mean, people looked at it with disgust. And things were peaceful. I'm sure there was still a sense of anger about us, but we understood that everyone else was in the exact same situation. Early into our fourth year, Brian Williams, the same man who gave us the news in the first place, gave us our date and time. March 15th, at 3:49 and 15 seconds p.m. Eastern Standard Time. People started wearing shirts that sported the slogan, "Beware the Ides of March." When a comet hit the Earth, it would take less than 10 seconds to consume every form of life on the entire planet. But we had more than a year left to live like kings. I mean, money was this item from museums, and suddenly people had time to say hi as you passed them on the street, and the days seemed brighter, and the nights seemed clearer. And people would stare at the night sky and wonder where the world's death was right now, what it was destroying on its way for us. March came. And suddenly it was the final day. There was a lot of crying. New York City had scheduled this sexathon, where millions of people would come to have sex with a complete stranger during the final moments of Earth. You could see the comet in the sky, with its streaked tail of ice behind it. Time just slammed into us. It all went by so quickly. Brian Williams joked about wishing that he was in New York City, and I don't know, just kind of calmed everybody. And scientists predicted this beautiful fireworks display just before the end. And suddenly the countdown began, and we had a minute left to live. The sun got blotted out from the sky. The ground got cold quickly. We winced at the beautiful fireworks display. We stared into the shadow of death itself, for the Grim Reaper had come to collect us all. Then each person said the words, each in their own language, 3, 2, 1. The wind was magnificent. The darkness faded into light. And at first, we thought that our countdown meters must have been off from all the rest. But then it occurred to us that it had passed. It had missed us. And again, with Brian as our leader, he shouted the now immortal words into the microphone. It missed us. Thank you, God, for sparing us all. And all of a sudden, men made love to their wives, and people went to church, and they baked brownies for their next-door neighbors, and thousands of people contracted sexually transmitted diseases from New York. And that was a good thing, because it meant we were alive. And new shirts were sported that said, "See what a little prayer can do." And we repaired what was broken. And we counted our blessings. But almost immediately, money made its way back into almost every culture. Companies started trying to turn a profit once again. The protesters insisted that we shouldn't waste this chance to live forever in a modern-day Garden of Eden. But mankind is predictable, and we did what was to be expected. I mean, we remembered the end of the world for a little while. We erected a couple of museums. We made a special commemorative coin. And then we forgot about it. New tragedies hit, and we forgot about them too. In the end, the result we came to was that we are what we are, and we can't change that. We may hide it for a little while, but we will fail. We will falter. We will not succeed. But for a moment in time, we have put right what had once been wrong with this world. We put fear, sin, hatred, spite, and evil back and let loose to this world hope. Instead of holding on to it, we opened a new Pandora's box. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to contain it again.